Jeder hat mich belogen, sogar die SS. Die gesamte Generalität ist nichts weiter als ein Haufen. Sie nennen sich Generale, weil sie Jahre auf Militärakademien zugebracht haben, nur um zu lernen, wie man Messer und Gabel hält. Aber alle diese Verräter werden bezahlen. Sie werden das saufen in ihrem eigenen Blut.
Bitte gerne. Jetzt beruhig dich doch.
Humor is a thoroughly subjective matter. Its functionality depends on several factors such as personal tastes, current mood, specific settings, styles, payoffs, and the charismatic endeavor of its igniting devices. There are shows, animated series to be exact, that are usually considered funny and entertaining by a general audience, but that, quite frankly, don't really appeal to my tastes, mostly because they try too hard to be nonsensical and weird for the sake of being nonsensical and weird, or maybe just because the main character's bro-esque attitude annoys me to death. Like I said, various random factors. Now, if I would have to point out all the little things that makes me absolutely despise a series like Hetalia Axis Powers, a simple review such as this one wouldn't quite suffice. To be fair, I may not be the most unbiased and politically appropriate critic to analyze an anime starring the least funny Italian stereotype ever devised, since I'm Italian myself. Luckily for me, Italia does a splendid job making my own ordeal easier by being incredibly dull, repetitive, and irritating to the point of wanton rage quit. The peculiar shtick about the show is that every character is the literal personification of almost every nation on Earth. Hidekazu Himaruya's serialized piece is an allegory about the various political roles of each state during the most prominent historical events of the 20th century. In an extremely light-hearted yaoi-ish manner, that is. The titular main character is, in fact, Italy, a completely useless and coward buffoon that can only think of eating pasta and being ambiguously gay around the uptight Germany and the awkward Japan, aka the rest of the Axis powers. Believe it or not, I don't feel offended by the over-the-top portrayal of Italy's worthlessness on an international scale in this show, that would be pretty accurate, sadly enough, but rather the way this overall digesis is presented. Its main focus is the somewhat weirdly homoerotic relationship between the three main characters, which could have actually escalated to a rather bold satirical representation of the game of politics. The issue, however, is that Hetalia is not a satire. It's a fluffy comedy with a very large female fanbase. As such, the most fundamental political and social occurrences of the last 100 years of human history are pretty much reduced to a blatant fan service fiesta, so to speak. There is something horribly wrong in having World War II metaphorically represented in a scene featuring three possibly gay men frolicking around a bonfire on a deserted island, while unwieldy shenanigans ensue on a constant basis. Even worse than that is having the Austrian invasion of the Italian nation during the previous war, one of the bloodiest and most tragic chapters in my country's history, by the way, deformed and twisted by the pathetic acts of cowardice of our main character instantly surrendering to the enemy. Offensive doesn't even begin to describe it. I could argue that perhaps that pitiful scene right in the first episode might have been a direct homage to Alberto Sordi's performance in Mario Monicelli's La Grande Guerra, one of the best Italian war-related tragic comedies of all time. But this show is obviously not that clever. Speaking of cleverness, and the tragic lack thereof, the overarching humor falls more flat than Wile E. Coyote in a cliff. At first it's nice enough, with all the personified nations reprising their most commonly known stereotypes for the sake of a good chuckle. America is egotistical and self-centered, France is effeminate, Great Britain is stubborn, Austria loves to play the piano in the most inconvenient places, etc., etc. Unfortunately, being all one-note tropes with no real substance, their various gags get old pretty fast, thus leaving nothing but a sour flavor in my mouth as I scratch my head in the face of some of their most baffling antics. At the end of every episode, which are averagely 5 minutes in length each, there is a segment called Chibi Italia, which is exactly what you might think it is, a super deformed parody depicting a cute child version of Italy during the Austrian domination around the Renaissance period. It doesn't have any tangible relevancy aside from making the fangirls go nuts. In conclusion, Hetalia Axis Powers is a waste of satirical and allegoric potential, a dual rehearsal of horribly misplaced shonen-ai tropes that's too lighthearted for its own good, and an irritating misinterpretation of world history. Then again, I might be too biased against it. Yes, sure, let's go with that.
Befehle sind in den Wind gesprochen. Es ist aus.